I will say that when we were planning this, we were very conscious of the fact we didn't want to create death by PowerPoint. And you know, we've all been there, and it's been a bit of a nodding session. But there is so much information to get across in a very short period of time. I promise you, we've done our best to keep it as concise as possible. At the same time, give you an informative way where you can go away and base some decisions on fact rather than potentially hearsay. Okay, this is our definition. It's our own internal in-house definition. All those elements of construction that involve the pre-assembly of a number of components in a factory which would otherwise be installed on site as separate components. David touched on it earlier. I don't know, I haven't seen any figures for a long time, but I'm just wondering in a typical housing site how many deliveries take place per week. Whereas all the deliveries for an off-site housing project, there's just one wagon come from the plaster board manufacturer coming to the factory, and the Farge don't have to have 40 wagons delivering to 40 different Barratt sites all over the country. In terms of the green credentials, this is interesting. And you multiply that with all the products, all the components in a traditional housing site. So who are we? Specialist offsite consultancy. We operate in one single vertical market. We operate across the UK. We have operated abroad, but we focus on the UK. Internally, we have over 30 years experience in the use of offsite technology. And we enable project teams to exploit the benefits of offsite. What does that mean? We spend about 25% of our time still working with manufacturers, developing, designing new products for them, helping them with that essential, critical route to market, certification, lean manufacturing processes. We were involved in the whole layout of the factory for Accord. You may be familiar with what Accord are doing as a housing association, building their own timber frame. We did the factory layout, the machinery purchasing, the whole gambit, if you like. And it's that close relationship that we have with the manufacturers that we think gives us quite a special insight into the supply chain in the UK. Therefore, we do appreciate the challenges that are involved and have been involved over the years in that whole sort of concept to handover period. And where does it start? And where do you start engaging? You've seen most of this already, so I'm going to fly through this. Again, avoiding death by PowerPoint. I will just bring them up. Overcoming skill shortage, it's very, very relevant at the moment. We had somebody here yesterday who told me that he has 3 sites mothballed at the moment because he can't get bricklayers. And whether you believe the Sun newspaper or not, it doesn't really matter, but a headline, I think it was 3 weeks ago, London brickies now on £100,000 a year. A few of us might think of a career change. The obvious reduction in site disruption, greater certainty, predictability. If it's not already self-explanatory, it will be by the end of today. Exemplary health and safety. We keep seeing this, it's a strapline, everybody says it, but what does that mean? And I'm going to focus on that today. Not in a huge amount of detail, but I have an interesting twist on it. And you're welcome to comment. And demonstrable sustainability, for all the reasons that I believe we understand. Lower capital and whole life cost. The whole life cost particularly, if the quality is really that good, if there are very few latent defects in the product, then obviously it's cheaper to maintain. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? So again, touching on what we do, we will get involved right at the front end. Off-site feasibility, there are some people in the room today who I've worked with personally. The build strategy, the system selection. We are sat here today as an independent. We do work with Waco. Yes, we do, but if you employed us to get involved in a project, we would go to the market and find the best solution for you, and it might not always be volumetric. We will therefore get involved in that critical off-site supplier selection. We will handle the ITTs for you. We will do mid-tender reviews on behalf of the client, obviously under your guidance and instruction, and then pull together that critical comparator sheet that says, well, here's your bottom line cost, but this is what you're getting. That's what you're getting for that, that's what you're getting for that, and these are the considerations. There is a critical part which we're going to look at, which DFM or DFMA, Design for Manufacture and Assembly. It's that part between we have a site, we have a concept, we have an idea, and we need to get to procurement. And you're going to see in a minute, if we don't engage early enough, that can go considerably wrong. This is a bit tongue-in-cheek, and that's why I put the word usually in inverted commas. I was sat with a very well-known national private developer not so many months ago, and they gave me a cost of build per square foot, because builders still work in square feet. And I said, I'm sorry, I said, you can't buy the materials for that. I just don't get that price. And it's, when you actually drill down into their pricing structure, the 280 guys, white-collar guys that are in the regional office aren't in that price. So all the design work, all the QSs, the estimators, the guys in procurement, none of those are costed into that. They've got a net price at site level. You might only be borrowing the money for 6 months rather than 12 months, and the base rate might only be 0.5% right now, but there's some very interesting charges for development loan interest until you get the opportunity to convert that to a mortgage on a completed building. And the prelim cost is applied to the whole programme. Yeah, on prelims you've got your setup costs, you've got your demounting costs, but that kind of fixed fee, I don't know, £4,000, £5,000, £6,000 a week, that's going to be applied to the whole 12 months if you're on site for 12 months. If it's off-site, it may be 6 months. It's a consideration. I'm happy to be challenged on these figures because these are not up here to say this is the price. This is about a principle. It's about an idea. And I can tell you that the costs are very close. I can tell you that the structure price I put under factory is based on a published budget price from Waco. And this isn't based on the 87-metre house they've built, and you're going to see today, this is based on a 95 square metre, 3-bed, 5-person, semi-detached. And it's based on a development of 100 units. So the plot price is the same for both. The infrastructure price is the same for both. I think I put about 10 grand per plot in there. And then we get to structure. You can argue that if you like, I don't mind. I'm happy to be challenged on it. It's about the principle of the idea. Landscaping stays the same. I've changed the prelim. I haven't maybe been too accurate because there's a setup cost and a debank cost, which is going to not necessarily make that a 50-50 split. So we got an interesting subtotal, but then I said, okay, and if you look at this at the bottom here, I said, well, let's say these are for rent. That's £600 a week, £600 a month, a week, I wish. It's £600 a month, and they are for rent. And I finished 6 months early. Now, I've allowed for the fact that we've got a phased release on traditional, and I've also given that phased release into offsite as well. But then if you are actually finishing 6 months earlier, how much income are you bringing forward from those rentals? And so should we not be doing the full 360 business analysis and not just looking at cost of build? If we just focus on cost of build, we're missing a trick, we're missing an opportunity. So I talked about concept to order and I talked about engagement early. Typically, and over the years I've been involved in offsite, and we've spoken about housing, somebody comes to me and they said, I got planning on these, can you get me a price? No. Sorry? I can't put those through the factory. I could go to Waco, but guys, it didn't have off-site manufacturing in mind. The architect didn't have off-site manufacturing in mind at the time he designed those buildings. You can go back to planning and we'll reconsider all those DFMA considerations, and then we can have another pop. But really what we need to be doing, we need to be engaging with somebody in the off-site industry. Is this a plug for me? Or we choose our off-site partner, the manufacturing partner, and we say, can we just get together with our architect and talk about grids, integration, interface, all those critical areas that the architect has to understand. And the architect, suddenly the blinkers come off and he goes, wow, I have got an opportunity for design flair here. I'm not as restricted as I thought. All I've got to understand is that David talked about platforms earlier, 50, 60, 70, 80% of the platforms on a dozen different styles of houses could be the same when they're modernised. And if we understand that as an architect, and we design around those key parameters, then we've got a product we can take to the industry, to the supply chain. So give me a price, because we know it works in the factory. And the majority of factories work to similar key parameters for design for manufacturing. So what we need to do is get to design freeze. It's critical. You don't have to have design freeze in traditional build. We can phone up the builder halfway through the project and say, I know it's a variation, but can we move a few sockets? Can we change the kitchen design? We've had some input, third-party input. We'd like to make these changes. Yeah, we can put that through as a variation. We can do that. Can't do it in a factory. Can you visualize for a minute? We've all seen it on TV. Car production line, 8 different styles of motor car going down the production line. And there's a process, isn't there? It's a controlled process. You can't have a punter from Southampton phone a Mercedes in Germany and say, can I have a different colour seat? I know my car's halfway down the production line. And could I have different headrests? It doesn't work. So design freeze is critical. It's a major consideration if you're going to go down the route of off-site manufacturing. So we need that by Reba Stage E. And it's way before we get to the tender process. So there's a lot more forward thinking in the process. But we've proved time and time again, if you apply yourself to the idea, it's very easy to achieve. I put here post-design factory procurement is not successful. I didn't want to use the word impossible, because anything's possible, but you wouldn't want to pay for the additional cost if you haven't taken the right approach. I hope it's clear. Right. I said earlier, we keep hearing exemplar health and safety. How? Why? What does that mean? Well, it is obvious, I guess. There's very few staff on site when we get to the delivery phase. The work is in a very, as you'll see today, it's a very controlled environment. There's only one element of the work that is work at height. So you'll see an important fact on that. Third highest cause of fatal injury. And they're done in harness, and you'll see the running lines, safety lines that go through the ceiling of the factory, and they clip on, and all the work at height is controlled. But there's some amazing figures here. I find this fascinating. Well, it's shocking really, isn't it? 5% of the workforce, construction, the UK national workforce, but 31% of all fatal injuries. We have done incredibly well as an industry over the past 10 years. I mean, that has dropped dramatically. These figures have come from the latest report in October this year. And of that 31%, 37% of those were self-employed. Very transient workforce, not familiar necessarily with the surroundings and the processes and the different operation methodologies and standards that different companies have. So today, I'm on a Balfour site, next week I'm on a Kia site. Yes, they do all run to very high standards, but you do have that transient mentality. And as I said, fall from height. So, if we go to the management regs, 1999, I love this bit because it kind of gets interesting here. Now, this is straight out of the management regs. And I put an asterisk on this one here. But if we look at this, adapt to technical progress by taking advantage of new technology. Are we talking about new technology? Well, we're talking about new methods. It's not necessarily new technology, because all the components we could be using on a building site anyway, but it is technology. Replacing the dangerous with the non-dangerous or less dangerous. So if we go off-site, are we doing that? Most certainly. If we give priority to collective as opposed to individual, which it is very much on site. If you think about a typical traditional site, and you've got a scaffold around the outside, how many people work at height on that top lift of the scaffold over the period of the contract? And we've already explained to you, only one person works at height in the factory. So, to me, if we are going to avoid risk, we design it out. If we design it out, we look for